So getting into residential, which obviously my career started in residential. I was on a framing crew for about 2 years, framing houses in St. Augustine. And then I worked for the general contractor in St. Augustine as an assistant carpenter. And so I was heavily invested in the residential market. And that was really where my true passion and initial aspirations was to be in residential construction. But then opportunities came up to get into industrial construction and travel the world, and I couldn't turn that opportunity down. So that was a lot of fun. But we found the trials and tribulations with starting a business in an industry so vast as the access control point and vehicle crash barrier industry, that it was very much a startup industry. We were dealing with a lot of those growth pains, and we were not a big operation. We didn't have the deep pockets that a lot of other people in the industry knew that they were going to be, investing this money out with maybe a 10-year payout and things like that. We just weren't of that size. We didn't have that deep of pockets to be able to do that. So we were constantly in this money chasing struggle where payment terms back then with government contracting were also much, much worse. I remember one particular project we completed for Little Rock Air Force Base, and 365 days later, after we had completed the project, we received final payment. So we were always in a very difficult cash position, trying to keep the company moving, very difficult to pull profits, and very difficult to realize any of our hard work, the success of our hard work. So we were in between phases for a project in Orlando. We were doing the Orlando VA, where we were installing 12 crash barriers out there. So we were in between phase 1 and phase 2. And as I was waiting to go back out there for phase 2, I saw an ad on Craigslist that said, "Hey, we're looking for contractors to renovate homes for investors." So I said, well, I got 2 months before we mobilize back to Orlando. I'll go check it out. Well, me and my project manager at the time for the security business, we just grabbed all my old tools back out from college, threw them in the back of my pickup, and him and I personally went out and renovated this house for this investment group. And we completed it in 2 weeks, and we got paid in 2 weeks. And I was like, hey, there's something to this. This is a lot nicer than waiting 365 days to get paid for a project I completed. And I said, well, you got another one of these? And they said, yeah, we got another one of these. And then quickly from there, within less than 6 months from there, I had probably 20 homes under construction, and we had crews going. And then a year later, I had an operation in Jacksonville and an operation here in Tampa, where we had, in both cities, we had about 20 homes under construction at a time for full renovations. It was kitchens, baths, floor, paint, interior, exterior, yard, landscape work, everything needed for the investment groups after the housing market crashed and they were buying up all these properties to try to resurge them and put them back out for, investment portfolios. So it quickly took off, and it was kind of obvious that, hey guys, I looked back to my business partners when we were doing the gate stuff, and I just said, this is difficult to pass up. I actually walked away from a very large contract that we had. We were doing 47 test gates on the U.S.-Mexico border, and I walked away from that job, giving it all back to my one business partner, and just said, I'm going to go chase and pursue this residential thing. I think it's going to, in the long run, I think it's going to pay out better than continuing to pursue the industrial market of the government contracting with the gates and the access controls. It just, I think it was a much longer time duration needed before we would realize any success in the government sector for that industry, because it was so new and it was up and coming. I was like, I can quickly transition and pivot, get over here into the residential market for these investors, where as soon as I started completing projects, it was no shortage of work to say. So, and they just kept throwing the work at us. We never had to do any marketing or any advertising. I was known in the industry, in the area here, for investors and large investment groups who knew how to get hold of me. So that ended up, we transitioned, and that became our bread and butter for close to 8 years, was just doing the investor work. And then ultimately I saw the writing on the wall there, and I was like, I think this is a short-lived operation, which 8 years was not what I expected it to last. Every year I kept saying, I think this is the last year of it. This is the last year of it. Well, it went on well over 8 years, but we got out a little earlier than some others towards the end of the market. And I said, let's make the shift. Let's start going into the light commercial work. Let's start going into end user residential work for homeowners, maybe doing some more custom renovation work, things like that. And so then we started making that transition. And then ultimately we find ourselves here today. where that's our primary focus. We still do some light commercial work. We don't pass that up for some of our clients that still reach out to us and we have great working relationships with, so we continue to do those. But our primary focus is residential remodel work for homeowners. So that's how we got into it. It was kind of a fluke thing, to be honest, just an ad on Craigslist, and went and did a job. And I was like, this paid a whole lot better and a whole lot faster than waiting 365 days to get paid from the government. So yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer and made the transition, and it's paid off since.